In the world today, we're all faced with many distractions and many temptations. But people don't typically just fall into temptation, they slide into it. But the problem is, by the time they realize what's going on, it's too late. The decision has already been made. But the danger is not in the temptation, it's in permission. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ben and this is As the Lion. Today we're going to be talking about temptation and how to overcome it in the world today. If you haven't seen last week's video, I highly recommend you checking it out. We go over the basis of the channel, our motto being, we make no peace with sin, who I am, and a little bit of my testimony. With all that out of the way, let's jump right in. Today we're going to start out by going to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. Where it says, "No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it." It's kind of a mouthful. Paul has this way of writing multiple subjects and thoughts about one subject into the same sentence. But here's the part that everybody misses with this. Scripture says God will not allow temptation beyond what we are able to overcome. And he always provides a way of escape. And here's the key takeaways from this verse. Temptation does not equal sin. The escape exists before the fall. The problem isn't access, it's awareness. The way out doesn't just disappear. We simply stop looking for it. We're going to move into the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 16, where it says, "Above all, taking the shield of faith with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one." This verse puts a couple things in perspective for us. Number one, the enemy's not going to attack you head on. You have to realize Satan is the smartest and most powerful being God ever created. And he's been around since, way longer than any of us. He knows how humans work. He knows how we work. He probably knows you. He's not going to just come out and try to just hit you right upside the head. No, he's going to find, everybody's got proclivities, our Achilles heel, if you will. A lot of men, it's lust or pride or ego or feeling, like I need to be affirmed, right? And he's going to try to hit you wherever he can. I had a friend tell me a long time ago, the devil attacks people differently. He said, for me, I'll never do drugs. He's not going to come at me with drugs. He's like, but I have a problem with lust. And so that's where his proclivity is, right? And it kind of it circles all the way around. Everybody's got something. The devil knows who you are. He's not dumb. As we mentioned last video in 1 Peter 5:8, it says the devil goes around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. The beginning part of that verse says, stay vigilant and stay sober of mind because of those things. The thing to remember about temptation is that they come as fiery darts, not as a siege. They'll come like bang, 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 bang. It's not like a constant, just overwhelming thing. And God, being faithful, says, I will always give you a way out. And now, herein lies the danger. We have the 4 steps to committing a sin, giving yourself the subtle permission to sin. It goes from a thought, to an image, to suggestion, to permission. Step 1 is a thought. And a thought is unsolicited. We are fallen creatures. We are depraved. We've got the flesh and the spirit, and the flesh is warring against the spirit. And we're constantly at this battle, this tug of war, right? You're going to have thoughts that come into your head that are not right. I heard a pastor say one time, if I could take all of your thoughts, anybody in this room, myself included, and put all of your thoughts from the last month, maybe even the last hour, maybe even the last 10 minutes, who knows? If I could take all your thoughts and put them onto a DVD somehow and put them on display for everybody to see, you would run out of this room screaming because you'd be so embarrassed. But this is the reality, right? We all have these thoughts. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, you can't overcome them, right? We can get into some things you can do to try to help overcome them, but we're still fallen humans. You're still going to have these things, and you need to develop a discipline to tell yourself, hey, I'm not going down that road. But here's the thing about your thought. It appears. You didn't ask for it. It just came. It might contradict your values. And those things are fine. You're allowed to, that's the temptation. Temptation's not a sin. Permission, and what happens after permission, that's a sin. But how do we get to permission? Well, from the thought, you go to an image. Your thought becomes visualized. You start to focus on it. You start to replay the image. You might be reliving a fantasy in your head. You imagine the outcomes of what would happen if you did this. You start to soften the edges of it to try to lessen the impact of the blows. Images normalize what thoughts produce. Now, how do we get from thought to doing it, right? Well, the thought turns into a suggestion. This is where curiosity turns into familiarity. Now the thought starts talking back to you. This is where the language changes. Just this once. I won't let it get to that point again. I'm a different person now. I've changed. It's not going to be like that. Suggestion reframes disobedience as reasonable. Sin rarely says rebel. It says be fair to yourself. But what happens after suggestion? Well, now you're at permission. And this is the line that matters the most. Simply put, permission is internal agreement. You haven't acted yet, but the battle's already lost. You might say, I'll allow it this one time. I'm not going to let it get out of control. I'll handle this later. I'll deal with it later. It's not that big of a deal right now. And here's the key truth about all this. Permission precedes the action. By the time that the action takes place, the conviction has already been negotiated. What does that mean? You've already let yourself off the hook. You're just like, I don't care, whatever it is, let me get to it. And back to Ephesians chapter 6, verse 16, talking about the shield of faith. It doesn't block actions, it blocks the lies. You wear this thing, you fill your mind with the Bible, and you will start to stave it off, and you just won't succumb to it. So how do we fix this, right? Specifically, if you're dealing with a substance abuse problem, it's easy to say, hey, I've never done heroin in my life. I'm never going to put that needle in my arm, right? That's easy. It's all the little things you do to get to that point. But what if you're already in the trenches of it, right? I mean, I used to drink every single day. I used to have a problem with pornography. What do you do if you're already in the trenches? Some days you just wake up and you just feel so hopeless and broken, right? I'll never get out of this. I can't go however long without doing this. I don't know what my life would look like without. Well, how do we get past this? Well, this is where the renewing of your mind comes in. Simply put, garbage in, garbage out. And yeah, it's not a cliche. People overuse this in life. And they need to redefine what garbage is. There is a very real sense in like the physical, like you want to eat clean, you want to get some exercise that helps your mind out. But the reality is there's a whole spiritual thing that's totally disconnected from your mind. And you need the spiritual part. Your soul is the most important part of anything. Period. So we're going to go to the book of Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. So in Romans 12, 1 and 2, verse 1 says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Verse 2, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that it may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. You don't lose the battle in your behavior. You lose it in exposure by being around something you shouldn't be around. If we go back to my video 1, my example of hanging out with my friend who kept smoking a hookah, I started out with these huge walls and decided, dude, that's not for me. I didn't even decide. That's just who I was. I'm never going to do that. But prolonged exposure softened me to it, and my thought became an image, became a suggestion, became permission. And the sin is in the permission. Yes, the action is bad, but conceding on your morals, what you know to be right and wrong, that is the sin. What you repeatedly allow in becomes normal. Have you ever heard the saying, the first murder is the hardest? It's saying the first time you ever do something, you cross that line that you know is wrong, it's the absolute hardest thing. But by the time you go back, even for the second time, like I already did this once, it's not that big of a deal, right? But what happens by the time you get to 100 or 500 or 1,000th time? Well, at that point, it's just kind of like breathing. It is what it is what it is. If you find yourself in this trench that you've dug of substance abuse, it will take work. It will be hard. But these are the things. If you can, your mind is very powerful. If you can take that temptation before it even happens, you take your mind and you just put that wall up and decide. I made a video 2 years ago now when I was 6 months sober. And I said, dude, the hardest thing wasn't quitting. It was deciding to quit. And that's the truth. If you can just tell yourself, hey, I'm not doing this, in the same way I can't walk through that solid wall right there, this is not who I am, I'm not going to cross this line, that's the first step. And then you've got to maintain that wall, because the only person that's holding that wall up is you. And this is where the Bible comes in. This is where Jesus comes in. Let him in. He's strong enough to do this for you, right? That's the truth. And you've got to know what's right and wrong. You've got to read the word to get to it. And once you do that, God starts to convict you. And once you have the convictions, that is where it all happens. That's where everything stems from. Imagine you've got two people. This man over here, he eats very clean, cooks chicken, rice, broccoli every meal. He goes to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, sweats, exercises. And you've got this guy over here who just likes to eat McDonald's, Long John Silver's, doesn't do a whole lot, likes to just sit there and watch Netflix, do nothing else. He's living for the moment, right? If you leave those two in their environment prolonged, their outcomes are guaranteed. We are called to be separate from the world. Separation is not legalism. Separation is not pointing your nose up, looking down on people and being like, oh, I'm better than you now. No, that's not it at all. But you cannot remain in an environment and not get dirt all over you. You can't work in a coal mine and come out clean at the end of the day. There has to be some separation. There has to be a clean cut. It's just the way that it is. When I quit drinking, I decided to get my life straight. I tried it my way. I didn't like it. There was so much crap. I started putting sermons and Bible when we're flipping our house, when I'm working on the house, instead of listening to a podcast or like having Netflix up on the screen somewhere, I would start listening to these sermons, these biblical sermons. I'd listen to the Bible itself. When I was flipping this room specifically, I listened to the whole Bible from one end to the other. That's how long it took me to do this room. But when you stop, and I started filtering what went in my head. When you stop letting garbage in and you start putting good things in, my thoughts used to be horrible. If I was in traffic and somebody cut me off, the amount of vulgarity that I would have to stop from just flying out of my mouth, the amount of profanity anytime I was mildly inconvenienced anywhere I went, the amount of disgusting, depraved, like lust-filled thoughts. When I started replacing all the stuff I'd been doing and all the stuff I was letting in, and let me just say at this point, I wasn't watching porn, but we'd be watching stuff on Netflix that was just like not good, right? A lot of smut, a lot of things that just aren't right with what God wants. And I'm going to be honest, there's not a lot of good TV out there. There's just not. And there's probably going to be, if you're going to be serious about this, you're probably going to have to start cutting away a lot of stuff that a lot of people are going to look at you like, why are you being like that? You know, that's just the way it is. The world is, the Bible says this is the devil's world. He's the Lord of this world. It's just the way it is. But all I'm saying is within a year of me cutting this stuff off and filling my head more with the Bible and more with these sermons and understanding what the Bible meant and watching, contextual church history videos and content instead of understanding how everything works and comes together, I don't have profanity in my thoughts anymore. I don't think about things that I shouldn't be thinking about. Am I still a human? Absolutely. I still have these weird thoughts that pop into my head and I'm just like, hey, that's not for me, right? But like the content of my thoughts is not habitually horrible. It is a lot cleaner. And that's just something you've got to work on. Garbage in is garbage out. If you get pure in, you're going to start to see pure out. Before you start to argue the whole point of Jesus hung out with the sinners, he absolutely did, but he never sinned with them. He never hung around them long enough to become like an influence in his life. He would try to pull them out of their sin. And after he was done with all that, he would A, tell them, go and sin no more. And B, he would go and retreat into prayer, into solace by himself with God, and just spend time praying and refilling himself from God. You have to understand the separation that we're called to have from the world is about inputs, not about arrogance. It's not about me being better than you. It's about, that is the stuff that I don't align with. I'll tell you, I don't want that in my life, but I'm not going to just say, hey, I don't want that in my life, but I'm going to stay right here anyway, even though you're doing that, because that's ultimately going to affect how you are as a person going forward. Does that make sense? We're going to go to the book of James, chapter 1, verses 14 and 15, where it says, but each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Verse 15 says, then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. You cannot feed sin and starve sin at the same time. You have to feed what you want to grow and starve what you want to die. If temptation always offers a way out, and the fiery darts of temptation from the devil are aimed at your mind, the question isn't whether you can stand and take them. The question is, what are you feeding in your life? We make no peace with sin.